Jesse Richards. I am the author of this book, which is pretty obvious, as there's a picture of me and there's a lot of this book. I want to thank my publisher, Workman, for putting this together. I want to thank the bookstore so much. I've been coming to this bookstore for years, and it's one of my favorite places in the city. I featured it in the book, and it's just an incredible place. What I thought I'd do tonight was talk a little bit about the book, but then show 4 of the locations from the book and 4 bonus locations as like a thank you for coming out, and you get something a little special. So the book is a tour of New York City through my artwork. So it's a collection of my artwork of lesser known spots in New York. And it really came out of 2 things. One was in 2007, a meetup group started, the Central Park Sketching and Art Meetup Group. And I've been organizing the group since then, so that's some amount of years. And we go around the city and sketch. And so I had amassed a whole lot of artwork from that and thought I should publish this into a book. And later on came up with the hook of using lesser known places. More obscure, more interesting spots in the city that people might not have heard of. I realized that people of the group really enjoyed going to those types of places, and I realized that I had a love of history and of finding these places in the city. So it came out of that meetup, but it also came out of this group that I started volunteering with about 5 years ago called Big Apple Greeter. And we do walks around the city with visitors, with tourists who come to the city and want to see something about, you know, what it's like to live as an everyday New Yorker, not just visiting Times Square. Because tourists come to the city, they go to Times Square and they say, oh my God, this is crazy, I could never live here. And that's why we don't live in Times Square. All of those things together put the book together, and then working with my publisher, with my editor, realized that this could become a good guidebook for the city, not just an art book. So it's a way of exploring the city and of enjoying and appreciating art at the same time, hopefully. So I like that combination in the book. I hope everyone likes it too. There's 2 sort of goals of the book that I had. One was sharing my love of New York. So it's just, I have this intense love affair with the city in terms of the diversity and energy and creativity, the culture, the history, everything about it is incredible. And I just love sharing that feeling with others. And then the other is just sharing an idea of looking deeper wherever you are. If you're in New York, if you're in another city, if you're anywhere in the world, and realizing that everything around us was, in the human-built environment, was designed and thought of by people who made decisions around it and have a whole history and interesting background about it. None of it is accidental, and it all has interesting and weird stories that have happened in places you wouldn't even imagine. So that's sort of my goal with the book. With that, I'll get into the meat of it. And what I'd like to do is show, as I mentioned, 4 places from the book and 4 newer drawings I've done, newer places. Bonus, maybe they'll be for the sequel, if all of you buy a lot of copies. But you'll get to see them now. So I have old school visual aids. Can everyone see with the microphone in the way? You still see that? Yeah. All right, good. So starting here, this is the High Bridge. So it's this, like, the red bridge part. Now this drawing is interesting because it's not the drawing from the book. It's a second drawing I've done of the High Bridge. It's a pedestrian-only bridge. The thing is not that it's high, because we've all driven over high bridges. The thing is that it's pedestrian-only, which is crazy. It's like a long, thin, red sidewalk through the sky. It's built in 1848. It's actually New York's oldest bridge, and was originally part of the Croton Aqueduct, which carried fresh water over the Harlem River into Manhattan. It's absolutely beautiful now. You should go visit. It's capped by this octagonal water tower that's so nice. You can see this in the background if you see the movie In the Heights. They have a whole swimming pool scene. That swimming pool is next to this water tower. The only tip is not to go on the bridge in August because it is extremely hot and the red bricks reflect all the sunlight. So, too hot. The next one I want to show, let's see here. It takes a minute longer than switching slides. This is the Isidore and Ida Strauss Memorial. So it's on 106th Street and Broadway, the Upper West Side. Isidore and Ida Strauss were well-known philanthropists. They were among the 1,500 passengers who died during the Titanic sinking in 1912. Isidore was a congressman. Thank you. Isidore was a congressman and notable for taking over the Macy's Company with his brother Nathan and opening its store in Herald Square in 1902. An eyewitness account from a Titanic survivor noted that Ida refused to get into a lifeboat without Isidore after the ship hit the iceberg. She gave her fur coat to her maid and insisted she get into the lifeboat, staying arm in arm with her husband. They were briefly depicted in the Titanic movie. Almost immediately after their deaths, the city designated Strauss Park and this monument. The bronze figure is an allegory for memory. It's not actually one of them. It just represents memory. But it's an absolutely beautiful statue, beautiful place to visit. The next one, and these are different degrees of obscure. These are what I call the Peter plaques. These are two of several of them, and these are one of the first weird things I discovered in the city because it's near where I live. This is on 2nd Avenue between like 20th and 21st. And these are plaques in the sidewalk by a park that's dedicated to Peter Stuyvesant and Peter Cooper, two famous historical figures that lend their names to Stuyvesant Town and Peter Cooper Village. But they took that concept of Peter and ran with it, and they have a whole bunch of different sidewalk murals of Peter Piper, Peter Pan, Peter Rabbit, Peter and the Wolf, and my favorite is Peter Parker. So they've got Peter Parker there with like the split face Spider-Man, Spider Sense going, which is really cool. And this is actually turned out it's from the renovation of a playground that's right there in 1998. And Peter Cooper, featured here, was an industrialist and philanthropist many years ago. So these are the Peter plaques. And then this one's kind of a mouthful. This is the Evangeline Blashfield Fountain. It's on 59th Street, right under the 59th Street Bridge in this little park. Underneath the bridge are these Gustavino tiles. It used to be a supermarket there, and now I forget what it is now, but there's a TJ Maxx, and right behind the TJ Maxx, which is not normally what you find behind a TJ Maxx, but is a beautiful little park that's hidden and has this fountain with this tile artwork. So Evangeline Blashfield was an activist and advocate of the arts, and she was shocked by the poor sanitation of the farmers market that was there in like the 1910s, and she wanted to dedicate a fountain of clean drinking water to the city. So she designed this fountain. Her husband did the tile work, and she was the model, and she's the model for the figure of abundance. And sadly, she didn't live to see the fountain finished. She passed away from the 1918 Spanish flu, right before its dedication. And the mosaic was recently restored in 2003. So it's this really beautiful spot. They decorate it with all these lights during the holidays. And I don't know who's putting that much effort into it and who's decorating the whole thing. It's stunning, but I've never seen another living soul there. So, but we appreciate it. So those were four that are featured in the book. And so now I've got some bonuses. This is one of the houses in Washington Mews. So it's Mews, M-E-W-S. And this is a little street right off 5th Avenue, just north of Washington Square Park. and it's former stables. That's what Muse means. That used to be stables for the mansions on Fifth Avenue. The Fifth Avenue down there is still residential, but it's all apartments now. But there used to be large mansions. So there's this little street that looks like a charming European street. It looks Spanish or something. It looks really out of place with these little stable houses, these carriage houses. And this one's one of my favorites. I just think it's beautiful. And they're currently NYU faculty housing and faculty buildings and different departments of the university. But it's a wonderful little spot. Before they were part of NYU, they were converted into artist studios, and one of them was Gertrude Vanderbilt Whitney's. She went on to found the Whitney Museum. She also did a sculpture of Peter Stuyvesant, speaking of the Peters, that's in Stuyvesant Square. So that's Washington Muse. This one you might recognize if you've been in Astor Place or the East Village. These are the Mosaic Man's mosaic poles. So this artist named Jim Powers, let me make sure I got that right, Jim Power, who's nicknamed the Mosaic Man, has dedicated decades to decorating the East Village with beautiful mosaics. And his mission, as he describes it, is to ease the city's anxiety through beauty, which is just amazing. He's been doing this for so many years. He's a Vietnam veteran, and he's still doing it, and the city has officially condoned it and said this is fine, and we accept it. But he decorates all these different street signs, street poles, lamp posts, all of these things through a trail through the East Village, which is just very, very cool. And then, let's see what's next. This one is the Manhattan Municipal Building. So if you've ever taken the 6 down to Brooklyn Bridge City Hall, you might recognize this. It's the end of the stop there. You come out and you're immersed in this beautiful cathedral-like space, which is just incredible. It's another example of Gustafino tiles. So which are in a number of places in the city. The Oyster Bar in Grand Central, for example, they did the whispering. You can whisper in Grand Central. The Bronx Zoo Elephant House, Ellis Island's Registry Room, the Queensboro Bridge. They did a lot of things. In the late 19th century, Spanish immigrant Rafael Gustavino invented these ingenious zigzag patterns and arched structures that hold up this type of ceiling. The vaulting techniques ended up being used in over 200 places in New York, and this 1914 building is one of the best examples. It's actually one of the largest government office buildings in the world, hosting 2,000 employees. It's also home to Big Apple Greeter, which has a tiny office there, which is the group that I volunteer for, and to show people around the city. And this spot, like right around over here, was where Crocodile Dundee was almost mugged and pulled out his knife. So you can see, if you watch the movie, you can see this beautiful scene, except that there's graffiti everywhere because it was the 80s. And then our last one, I saved the single most obscure thing I could find in the city for last. Might be hard to tell because this isn't something that comes to mind easily, but this is a statue of a rhinoceros standing on its horn while a salamander watches. Seems like an obvious thing to sculpt. This is at 63rd Street near Lincoln Square. So it's in West End Park, which is this otherwise sort of neat, innocuous little park. It's a single small square block with trimmed landscaping, a pretty big playground. And right in the corner of a path in the center of the park is this boulder with this rhinoceros on it. It's a 1975 work, titled Newton and Darwin, and it's by sculptor Nobi Shioya. The accompanying text adds sort of an inspirational flair to it. It says, "It wasn't that the rhino couldn't fly, it simply had never occurred to him." So, if you are up 63rd on the Upper West Side, happen to see this, my favorite thing about New York is discovering things like this randomly and then having to do research to figure out, wait, is it just me? Did I really see that? Is that a real thing? Because there's usually no one around and you're like, that's too weird to be true. Well, that's all I have for now. There's over 100 of these in the book, if you're so inclined to check it out. And again, I want to thank everyone for coming. I really appreciate it. I'd love to hear which of the things you like the best in the book, which are your favorite spots, and if you have any tips of unknown spots that I might not know about. I take all tips like that, so I love it. Thanks, everyone.
Questions for Jesse? Any questions?
Yeah. Oh, wait.
How many years did the book take?
How many years did the book take? Well, the artwork in it dates back, some of it, to when the sketch group started, like 2007, 2008. So there's art in there for 15 years or so. Putting it together in the book took about a year and a half process to get an agent, and then a short process to get a publisher, and then about another year and a half or 2 years to work on the book and get it published. So it's a process. Yeah. Yeah, go ahead.
One of my favorite entries is the one about the Hall of Fame.
Yeah.
I love the way you describe that story. Can you just tell that?
Yeah, sure. So she mentioned the Hall of Fame for Great Americans. So this is in Bronx Community College, and it's a hall, and as far as I can tell, and this is debated, but I think it's where we get the phrase Hall of Fame from. It is one of the first halls of fame, and it is a literal hall designed by Stanford White, the famous architect, sitting up on a hill on a bluff in the Bronx, looking over the Harlem River, or the Bronx River. And it's this outdoor colonnade of over 100 statues, each by a different artist, of the most famous Americans as voted by representatives from all the states. And most of them are from the first half of the 20th century, but they range from like Albert Einstein to Martin Luther King to Jackie Robinson to teachers and inventors and scientists and Ben Franklin and politicians and presidents and all of these people. And it's a very, very cool spot. It's hard to get to, and it is currently being repaired, so it is not open right now, but
also that it's in a song.
it's in the song from The Wizard of Oz, where the Munchkins sing that Dorothy will be a bust in the Hall of Fame. They are talking about this Hall of Fame. So,
Can you do the Munchkin voice?
which I don't know how the Munchkins know about it, no. Because it's not in Oz, it's in the Bronx, but, you know. Yeah, Rich. Yeah, Rich.
I've seen mosaics in the middle of the street in the asphalt. Is that a mosaic?
It depends on where it is. So if it's in the East Village, it might be part of it, but it depends on where it is. There's someone who does that art you might have seen in the streets that's like a little mosaic, but it's like this rubber, like this type of rubber that's pressed into the ground of different colors. That's not him.
That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah, that's someone else
Gotcha.
whose name I forget, but that's throughout the city as well. Yeah, that's more in Midtown often. Yeah. Yeah,
Which is your favorite?
which is my favorite. So I think my favorite drawing in the book is the conservatory garden. Oh, I flipped right to it, which is this one. So this is the conservatory garden in Central Park. It has 3 parts: an Italian garden, an English garden, and a French garden. They're currently doing work on it right now, so I hope that work makes it look even cooler, but we'll see. Like a lot of New York, like, oh, it's currently under construction, it's currently under scaffolding. Like it's just, you know, what the city is. But this is one of my favorite drawings, and it's one of my favorite spots to take the sketch group as well, because it's just this stunning garden. And that picture is this hanging wisteria over this ironwork. It's just beautiful. Yeah. Any other questions I can answer? One thing that I've been asked several times is what media I use for the art. It's a range, but about 75% of them, and what I've been doing in recent years, is all digital on the iPad. And I use an app called Tayasui Sketches that mimics watercolor really beautifully. I tried like maybe 20 different apps to find the best one that did watercolor, and this one I think is incredible. I also went back and colored some of the black and white ones that I had that had been done in pen and ink, colored them digitally. So there's a lot of digital work, there's some actual watercolors in there, and there's pen and ink drawings and a number of different things. Yeah.
How did you discover Kinokuniya, and what made you include it in the book?
Yeah, so this bookstore is included in the book. And the reason I included it is because it has, at least to me, what seemed like a secret, which is when you come in, you browse this beautiful bookstore, and you might not know that there's a hole upstairs and a hole downstairs. And it's just filled with all this stuff. And when I first discovered the upstairs and saw that it was filled with manga and comic books and art books and graphic novels and toys, that was like seventh heaven, and that was just amazing as a surprise to see. So I've always liked this bookstore. I don't remember the first time I found it, but I've definitely been on quests in the past to find every bookstore in the city and go in them. So it would have come out of one of those years and years ago. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks.
Good question.
And don't you feature it on a book lovers? Do you do a book lovers tour in there?
Yeah, so in the back of the book there's some different walks you can take where I string together some of the locations, and one of them is a book lovers tour through Midtown, through some different sites, bookstores and places from books, famous spots from books. So, nice. Cool. All right.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Well, that might be, so the question is, was there a place that's really hard for me to sketch or really challenging? That might be why I like the conservatory garden drawing, because that was really difficult. It has all this detailed line work of this intricate iron lattice work, and then all these hanging vines from it. And it's a curved perspective, like it goes around, and it's just really challenging, yeah. Yeah. One of the things I like about New York too, and the parks that I go to with the group, is any drawings where it's a combination of nature and architecture. And it's one of the great things about Central Park in general, but there's a lot of places in the city like that, and I really like seeing how nature interacts with human-made environments and architecture. So, yeah.
What about going to other places like Europe?
That would be great. Yeah, I was saying before we started, I was talking about this series of books published by Louis Vuitton. It's one of my favorite series of books. They're travel books, and in each one they paid an artist, a famous artist, to go to a city that was not their own and just fill an entire sketchbook with paintings. And they're gorgeous, and each one is in that artist's style. So if anyone knows anyone at Louis Vuitton that wants to pay me to go to Europe and sketch, I would be totally fine with that. So, yeah. Cool.
Good. All right. Thank you, Jesse, very much.
All right. Thanks, everyone.